Hi, I'm Josh Noazia of Evermeadow Farm. I started Evermeadow Farm about 6 years ago with the goal of managing the landscape around where I was living in a better way, and the way that I figured to do that was to get involved in rotational grazing. I believe that these rolling drumlin hills of Northumberland County are probably best suited for perennial agriculture, and by that I mean agriculture that's based on long roots in the ground and not a lot of tillage or a lot of herbicide use. So I felt like rotational grazing was the way that we wanted to manage our landscape here. We started on a rental farm about 1.5 kilometers away from here, and we did start with 6 sheep. We were rotationally grazing from day one. That was part of our plan, but it was pretty tricky, a little bit silly of a scale to do it at. So we slowly grew our flock. Over several years, we purchased some more sheep in, and of course they produced themselves naturally. So we were able to get a little bit bigger flock going, and that meant that we needed a bit more land base because we had started on about 15 acres. So once we got things rolling a bit, got our business developed a bit, our direct market meat business, we decided that we were going to take a crazy leap, a plunge, if you will, and we were able to purchase a farm just down the road from us where we were leasing before. And so when we came to this farm where we're currently at, about 2 years ago, we needed a little bit more infrastructure to rotationally graze because there was nothing set up here. There was no permanent fencing of any kind. The whole farm used to be a beef farm, but it was then later converted to cash cropping. So what we did was we applied for the OFCAF, so the On-Farm Climate Action Fund, through Soil and Crop, and that was able to help us out quite a bit, getting some of the infrastructure that we need to do rotational grazing on this farm here, including electro-netting fencing for the sheep. Some people call it sheep netting, energizers to power the netting, to actually put the juice into them, if you will, and also the reels and the hot wire that actually delivers the electricity to the fence lines. And not only that, we also got a support to purchase shade wagons, because part of rotational grazing involves making sure that the sheep or the livestock need, or have what they need rather, in every different paddock on the farm. And so the way we do it is we actually move the sheep every single day, sometimes more than once a day. And there's many areas of the farm that don't have shade or don't have protection from the elements. So we were able to purchase, through the support of the OFCAF, a mobile shade unit, essentially, which also doubles as a inclement weather kind of a barrier for the sheep to get underneath when it's raining really bad or really windy. And so those are some things that were super helpful for us to get rolling with rotational grazing on this farm. And we were able to try a few new layouts, new rotation plans, and kind of dial in the optimum thing for this pretty rugged kind of hill farm that this kind of adaptable, flexible fencing was able to help us with. That has been really great. One of the things that you'll notice here, like, these are all these old hedgerows, and when we got here they were super overgrown with buckthorn and other invasive plants. And so in like a typical permanent fencing arrangement, you would have permanent wire fence or even 5-strand high tensile fencing lining your fence rows. And so that's why these kind of invasive filled shrub lanes get created, is because they're outside of the grazing area or the production area. And so one of the cool things, the sort of a side effect of this temporary fencing that we move around, it actually allows us to graze inside these hedgerows. And so we're able to remove the buckthorn, and then the sheep graze down the new shoots of buckthorn. So we're actually able to mitigate the invasive presence on the farm at the same time. Something that wasn't really like the main purpose of the electric fencing, but it kind of helped. It was a nice bonus as well. And they can get in there in the really hot days and get some shade. So like flock size to paddock size, that's super variable depending on the producer and like the needs of what you have going on. For us, our whole rationale is like as high density grazing as we can manage, because we kind of operate under the paradigm of like high density management intensive grazing. So the concept behind that is you want to increase the density of your livestock as greatly as possible in a given like grazing event or moment, and then move them as quickly as possible. The reason for that is it allows for like a uniform grazing event instead of them being selective. It's otherwise known as non-selective grazing. So the sheep are going to go, and they're going to normally, under like continuous grazing or set stocking, they're going to graze whatever they want and kind of leave the stuff they don't want as much. Under high density grazing, they have to graze more uniformly, which favors the desirable grasses, and then subsequently they move. And like I said earlier, we move every day. So what that means is that the next grazing instance is longer away. It takes a longer time to come back to it, and that grass has more time to recover. And because grass is kind of adapted to herbivory or like grazing, it recovers, and a lot of the undesirable species don't recover as well. So you gradually actually increase your forage quality as you do it that way. You'll often see other farms that have continuously grazed pastures. They're often very, very short grass interspersed with a lot of thistles or other kind of shrubs or species that probably aren't as desirable. The cattle don't eat them or the sheep don't eat them. With this method of grazing, it's more labor intensive for sure, but what you end up with is pretty uniformly grazed paddocks, and then over time the grass is actually getting better and better and better and better. So I couldn't really speak to like what is my stock density in any given moment, because it actually changes. The paddock size, I'll change it according to, like this is a weird paddock where we have a lot of brush and stuff because this is like at a really steep slope here. But like normally in the main pastures, they're at a certain size. It's actually 4 nets. In this setup right now, there's 4 nets per paddock. So it's 164 times 164 feet. It was about 26,000 square feet if you really want to know. But it depends, right? So if I'm during like gestation or lactation for the ewes in spring, then I'll give them a bigger space so that they can be a little more choosy. And that way they get that nutrition that they need when they're in those high nutrition demand times. And that's one of the benefits too of this like temporary fencing, is that I can modulate the paddock size accordingly to what I need. So after they're done lactating, like when I wean the sheep, then I immediately shrink down the paddock size so that the ewes have to eat a little bit more aggressively, and they have to be a little bit less selective, which helps to dry them off and stop them from lactating, and also then it starts to improve. So I really look at it like there's different phases of the grazing season. There's the early spring where the sheep get a little more choice, and then as we get into autumn and we push really late into autumn, then they kind of have to clean up, and they're grazing quite densely. Rotational grazing does allow for greater flexibility, and there are different degrees of it, right? Like I represent probably like one extreme, like like most labor intensive, most smallest paddock size. So for me, because my rest periods are so long, I even get to the point where there's like whole sections of the farm that I don't graze in a season, and that becomes stockpile for winter. So then because of that, I can actually graze well into December, even January, if snow conditions allow. Sheep will like paw through snow, and they can actually eat like pretty well during the winter. And cover cropping is another option. If you work with neighbors, you can often access even later into the season, like corn stubble or cover crops. In my case, though, it's limited by like deep snow. If I get like a foot of snow, then I kind of have to bring them into the barn. But this rotational grazing, the way that we do it, basically allows us to keep our sheep easily through the whole month of November, and probably, if it doesn't get super snowy, into December as well. I think the main learning curve is just learning the grass and also the animals. So it's like a dance, right? So you're trying to balance the animals' needs and the grass's needs. And I come from this like belief that you should prioritize the grass, because if you prioritize like animal performance first, yeah, you're obviously going to get a better crop of animals at the end of your growing season, but you're not going to adapt your stock to your land. And so the kind of thing that we're trying to do here through our grazing program is develop a breed of sheep that is specifically adapted to this land and this management style with absolutely minimal inputs. If we wanted to prioritize performance, we would move the sheep more often, or give them a bigger area, basically. But we're prioritizing the grass recovery. So that was something that we had to learn. Like we knew that's kind of what we wanted to do, but we had to learn, when is it too far? Like when are we asking too much of the sheep? And that's like if they get emaciated or really thin, or they struggle in late lactation. Like those are the kinds of questions that we had. Like we know we want them to clean up. We know we want them to graze really uniformly, but are we pushing them a bit too much? And how do you know when you need to like lay off a bit and give them a bit more selective choice? So that was a big learning curve that, we're always learning every year about that. And the other thing is the grass itself, like, observing how long it takes to recover after a grazing event, when can you come back to the grass, understanding grass physiology a little bit more, and it's night and day different than continuous grazing, because continuous grazing, the grass basically never is fully recovered. And so the way that you calculate your stocking rate and your forage production is completely different than when you actually allow the full recovery of the grass. So that, again, was a bit of a learning curve as well. But and we haven't been doing it super long. So now over 6 years, I feel like we have a decently good handle. Like I know, for example, now it's early November. I know that I'm going to graze this pretty low. And some people say, well, you're going to graze it too low, and it's going to be subject to like frost kill. I have enough experience now. I don't think that's the case. So I think I can graze it low. It's going to have a good start in the spring, and we can move forward like that. So those are the kind of things you're working on learning. Yeah, I mean, our whole thing is kind of based around rotational grazing. So, I mean, the benefits are that we can use the sheep to achieve the goals we have for our land, and we can use, and simultaneously we can use the land base, so the forage production, to achieve the kind of sheep that we want. So like I say, we're trying to build this really adapted sheep to our circumstances, sheep that can grow really well on pretty meager, like relatively low quality farmland, marginal farmland. And we're already starting to achieve that. So we're already getting to the point where like our sheep, people come to buy them because they know they're really grass adapted. They don't rely on any grain inputs whatsoever. So that it starts to be something that's actually desirable, is kind of super low input sheep. And at the same time, we're achieving our land management goals. So that's wouldn't be possible without rotational grazing. So this year was one of the most severe droughts. It wasn't a really long duration drought, but it was what they call, I heard somebody say that it was what was it, a flash drought. So it was like really short duration, but no rain at all from like June until end of August, early September. And here we didn't have it quite as bad as some areas further north, like Lindsay Way, they had it even worse. But yeah, definitely like a lot of people didn't get a second cut of hay, definitely didn't get a third cut, and we saw grass fully browning up in ways that we hadn't seen since maybe 2016, or maybe not even as bad then. This long rest period does two things. One, it actually like the shade of the longer, more mature grass actually keeps the ground level soil cooler, which prevents that transpiration and that like superheating and drying of the top layer of soil. But also then we also have just more forage that's been produced throughout the season. So by the time we get to November, a lot of other people around that are doing set stocking, they may be finding that they're out of pasture. We still have quite a bit of pasture and expect to be able to, even in this drought year, graze all the way till deep snow. So part of that is the rotational grazing. Part of that is maybe we don't have quite enough stock yet. But I would say that it's given us a bit more resilience going into these kind of dry years for sure.